A boy woke up suddenly, feeling confused. He looked out the window trying to figure out where he was. When he turned his head toward a nearby mirror, he was shocked. His face was completely different from what he remembered, and there was a strange green stain on it. To his surprise, a system window appeared out of nowhere. When he read the status, he screamed, realizing he had turned into a goblin. Fantasy Frontier was a popular high-quality video game known all over the world. It had amazing graphics and a detailed storyline that made it one of the highest-rated role-playing games. He had played this game every day and remembered wandering around in it the day before, grinding to defeat goblins. He had fallen asleep while playing. Now he wondered if that was the reason he had been reincarnated. But of all things, why did he have to become a goblin? When he looked at the mirror again, he noticed that even though the system said he was now a goblin, he still looked mostly human. Then the system synced his memories with the character he had become. As he held his face, sweat dripping, he realized the original owner of this body had lived a difficult life. Suddenly the door opened. His little sister Lily entered the room cheerfully and reminded him he would be late if he didn't hurry. Still covering part of his face, he replied that he would get ready. A while later, as they walked, Lily happily hummed and told her brother she had made a lunchbox for him. While he thanked her, he noticed the road looked very familiar. He quickly realized this world was the same as the one in Fantasy Frontier. From the memories of his new body, he learned that he and Lily lived together after their parents had passed away. They were now heading to the mansion of their cruel employer, who treated them poorly, like slaves. Suddenly, Lily tripped on a stone and almost fell, but her brother caught her just in time. He asked if she was okay. Lily smiled and said she was fine, thanking him. He promised to protect her, smiling gently. Lily added that she was blind and thanked him again. The protagonist thought about how he had promised to protect her, but realized he was weak. After all, he had been reincarnated as the weakest goblin. Even so, he wanted to live a good life in this world, but didn't know where to start. Later, at the Demon Continent, in the evil merchant's mansion, the siblings were saying their goodbyes. After Lily left, our protagonist remembered the memories of his current body. His younger sister was blind, so he worked as a laborer, cleaning the mansion to support her. When he entered the mansion, his employer ordered him to move a large pile of dark ore that looked like a small mountain. He was pulling a cart loaded with the heavy ore when someone wearing white shoes suddenly kicked the wheel. The cart tipped over and he lost his balance, falling to the ground. The person responsible was Butch, who yelled at him to move faster and mocked him, saying that without dark element aptitude, he was useless. The protagonist stayed quiet and fixed the cart. Then another man with green hair agreed with Butch and mentioned that Butch had passed the entrance exam for the magician school. A man with purple hair, surprised by this, said that only elites could enter such a school. Butch smirked and said he had to take things seriously to pass. Noticing the protagonist still standing there, Butch sneered at him and teased that he should go eat grass or something. The protagonist clenched his teeth, but knowing his place as a lowly goblin, he stayed silent. While taking a break, he remembered the map inside the mansion showed it was the year 125 of the Demon Continent calendar. This was the same time as the start of the game, so he thought his knowledge might be useful. However, he doubted a goblin like him could do much when things began. Suddenly, he saw knights with capes flying through the air. When they landed, he noticed they wore special armor, just like the Holy Knight armor from the game. The villagers panicked, warning everyone that the hero's army was attacking. He quickly remembered that this part of the continent was supposed to be beyond the hero's reach. Realizing they had arrived much earlier than in the game, he began to worry. As the heroes continued to destroy their enemies, their commander laughed wildly, saying this was happening because the villagers had disobeyed their human lord. He rushed to his sister Lily and told her to run as fast as she could. Seeing Lily frozen in fear, he approached her and reassured her that they needed to leave. Suddenly, a group of bullies trying to hide bumped into him, shouting at him to move. Worried about Lily, he asked if she was okay, and she nodded. Just then, a door opened, revealing an ugly knight and his dog. The knight grinned menacingly and muttered that 2 animals had failed to escape. Determined to protect Lily, he stood up despite knowing he couldn't fight in his current state. He shouted at Lily, ordering her to run. The knight swung his blade, slashing him. He fell, blood spilling from his wound. As he lay there, he thought bitterly about how he had just reincarnated into this world only to die like this. As the protagonist's consciousness faded into darkness, he wondered if he had already died. Suddenly, a silhouette of a girl surrounded by light appeared. She muttered that, although she had reincarnated this fool and things had turned out this way, she wasn't completely surprised. However, she couldn't ignore the situation because it would cause trouble if an entire race went extinct. The girl opened a glowing screen and decided to grant him her power. The protagonist's screen appeared, and he saw that he had been given all forms of dark magic. When he looked at his previously useless screen, he was shocked to see it had leveled up to the maximum. The goddess explained that he wouldn't be able to use all the power immediately. He would have to learn how to control it over time. She seemed annoyed as she mentioned that it was because he had died so quickly. As she began to fade away, the protagonist asked her to wait, but she impatiently told him to wake up soon and defeat his enemies. Meanwhile, an old man full of rage ordered his knights to kill a girl. Laughing cruelly, he shouted for them to die. At that moment, the protagonist stood up and told them to stop. The knights charged at him, weapons raised, their eyes glowing with intent to kill. As his skill activated, the protagonist remembered the goddess's last words, to defeat his enemies. He used a level 32 dark boost and instantly killed all the enemies with incredible speed. As he landed on the ground, the old man froze in shock. The protagonist picked up a sword, appeared behind the man in an instant, and asked what he had just said about killing his sister. The old man angrily turned his head and shouted, asking who our protagonist was. In response, the protagonist struck him down in an instant, stating he was just a goblin. At this point, I also need to learn our boy's name. After some time, the smoke from the hero's attack cleared. The employer announced that the town's report confirmed the hero's army had been defeated. People were shocked and curious about who did it, but felt relieved that it was finally over. In an alley, the siblings sat together. The protagonist looked at his status window and stood up, but suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head as a surge of dark energy overwhelmed him. Lily asked if he was okay, and he replied yes, thinking he might unlock more power. Butch then appeared, greeting his father cheerfully and thanking him for being safe. He revealed that he was the one who defeated the hero's army, but admitted he hadn't planned on telling anyone. This news thrilled the father, who asked if it was true. Butch confirmed it and added that he used dark magic he had been practicing for a long time. Hearing this irritated the protagonist. While others admired Butch for being a savior, Butch told them not to praise him too much, saying he just did what needed to be done. He invited them to his mansion to hear the story of how he defeated the heroes, but said the information wouldn't be free. The protagonist realized Butch was only after fame and money. Butch noticed him and asked why he was still alive, calling him tough but useless. The protagonist stood up and asked if Butch's story about being a savior was a lie. Butch was startled but called the question nonsense. The protagonist challenged Butch, saying he would admit defeat if Butch could prove he wasn't lying. Butch became annoyed but agreed to the challenge, unleashing his power. He threw magic at the protagonist, who appeared to be burning. Butch mocked him, claiming he was talentless, and bragged that this was the same magic he used to defeat the hero's army. Suddenly, a massive dark aura appeared, forming into an evil dragon with glowing red eyes. It stared at Butch, who became terrified. The aura grabbed him and demanded to know if he truly defeated the hero's army. Stammering, Butch claimed he did. But as the darkness consumed him, he broke down and admitted he had been hiding in a warehouse and never saved the town. The protagonist released his magic, and Butch was left in shock and confusion. In his mind, the protagonist revealed that he had used a level 35 evil eye spell, which caused anyone who looked into his eyes to fall into a hallucination. He then told Lily it was time to leave. As they walked away, Butch's companions called out to the protagonist, asking if he was the one who defeated the heroes. The protagonist denied it, claiming he didn't know who the savior was. In his thoughts, he reflected on how, even though he had been reincarnated as the weakest goblin, he had gained great power through death. With his dark power, he planned to become the savior of this world. After some time, the siblings sat in front of their wrecked house. Lily said she was very tired because of everything that had happened. Her brother asked her to come closer. When she did, he placed his hand on her face and used a powerful spell called Dark Cure Level 38 to heal her. Even though Lily had been blind since birth, our protagonist believed the high-level magic could help her. Lily slowly opened her eyes, and when they fully opened, the first thing she saw was her brother. Seeing her surprised face, he explained that something had changed and that he could now use dark magic. Lily didn't believe him at first. To convince her, he stroked his chin and revealed that he had awakened his hidden potential. Since they were just goblins, Lily found it hard to believe such a thing was possible. Her brother smiled, patted her head, and said he was happy she could finally see. Realizing she was cured, Lily began to cry and called her brother amazing. He hugged her, and at that moment a notification appeared in the system. It said he had completed the second quest and that his dark magic skills had been expanded. It also mentioned that the Goblin Fairy would be deployed soon. Reading this surprised him, and Lily asked what was happening. Suddenly, a fairy goblin appeared from the system. She apologized for interrupting them and said this was the goddess's wish. She introduced herself as the Goblin Fairy and explained that her job was to guide him to the hidden goblin village. She called him the strongest unmatched mutation and said she hoped they would get along. Hearing about a hidden goblin village made him nervous. After some time, they began their journey. When they arrived at the demon continent in reverse, the protagonist thought about the idea of a goblin fairy. He remembered how the Fantasy Frontier game was known for its open world, where anything could happen. It had an advanced AI system that allowed players to develop their characters in many different ways. However, his thoughts were interrupted when the Goblin Fairy asked him what was wrong. Startled, he quickly replied that it was nothing. When they reached the hidden village of goblins on the Demon Continent, he quietly admitted to himself that he didn't know such a place existed. Even though he had knowledge of the game, this village wasn't something he had heard about. The Goblin Fairy explained that the village was protected by concealment magic, which kept it hidden. She then led him to the village chief, flying ahead to show the way. As they walked, he noticed some goblin girls staring at him and whispering. Suddenly, a group of goblin children approached Lily, calling her pretty and asking her to play with them. Lily wasn't sure what to do, so she looked at her brother. The protagonist told her it was okay to play for a little while, and she agreed. He felt happy to see her enjoying herself, especially since she had only recently regained her sight. Inside the chief's house, the village chief revealed a prophecy. He explained that their goddess had foretold that a young goblin boy, guided by a fairy, would come to the village one day. When that happened, the tribe would entrust its hidden treasure to him. The protagonist looked at a portrait of the goddess and wondered if she was the same one who had given him her power before he died. The chief then stood up and asked them to wait. While they waited, the Goblin Fairy explained that, despite being kind and gentle, the goblins in the village had very little food and resources. She said other tribes and even heroes treated goblins cruelly, and their village was barely surviving. Hearing this, the protagonist felt a deep guilt. In his past life, he had killed goblins like they were nothing. Now he was one of them. When the chief returned, he handed the protagonist a scroll. As he opened it, the protagonist was shocked by what it contained. The chief explained that their tribe was weak and rejected by other groups. Now they were on the verge of extinction. Because of this, they were entrusting their fate to him, the one chosen by the prophecy. Before the protagonist could respond, he noticed some goblin children listening nearby. The kids came inside, counted to 3, and then begged him to help them. He was surprised to see the other goblins gathering at the door. They all knelt down, saying they believed in the prophecy and pleading with him to save them. A while later in the forest, our protagonist thought about how goblins, though the weakest creatures at the start of the game, could still be troublesome in large groups. Some of them were even stronger than others. Goblins also had a high ability to reproduce. He remembered how goblins were once close to extinction and wondered if something had changed that he didn't know about. His thoughts were interrupted when the Goblin Fairy asked why they were in this place. Slowly standing up, the protagonist explained that he wanted to check his status and abilities. Looking at his skills, he saw that some were grayed out, which meant they weren't available yet. He realized he could unlock them by completing a quest. Aside from his magic skill, his stats were impressive. He then turned to a huge boulder and punched it to test his strength. When he cracked the boulder with one punch, the 2 people watching clapped in amazement. But the protagonist wasn't done yet. He used a level 10 flare bomb, causing the boulder to explode and send a strong wind rushing out. The blast almost knocked the 2 of them off balance. After the explosion, the Goblin Fairy was seen lying on Lily's palm, knocked out. The protagonist looked at his skill list and said, "That about sums it up." He thought that he was finally starting to understand how his magic worked. Feeling confident, he decided to move on to the next task. They headed to the location marked on the scroll, the hidden village of Goblin's secret cemetery. This place was where the ancestral heroes of the Goblin tribe were buried. The protagonist used his level 99 Goblin summon skill and successfully summoned the spirits of the Goblin heroes who now knelt before him. Among them were a hobgoblin, a gobdragon, a goblin girl, and a goblin general. The Goblin Fairy, amazed by the sight, whispered that things were getting more interesting. The protagonist explained that throughout thousands of years, even the weakest goblins rarely gave birth to one with the power and abilities of the strongest class. He marveled at the fact that he could summon these heroic spirits, who only existed in the past. The Goblin General bowed its head and addressed him as their Lord Messiah, asking for his command. The protagonist declared that with this power, he would end the war between the hero's forces and the demon army. He would make both the hero and the demon lord bow before him and bring peace to the world. As he held his sister and waved his hand, he vowed to become the Goblin Messiah. After a while, we see our protagonist falling into nothingness. Suddenly, someone called out to him. He moaned in response, and to his shock, the voice became louder, shouting at him, calling him an imbecile, and telling him to wake up already. It was the goddess, who had long white hair, 2 horns, and a white coat. The protagonist asked who she was, and the goddess replied that she was the goddess of goblins. He was surprised to hear that and remembered that she looked similar to the image he saw inside the chief's house. He didn't expect such a low-ranking monster tribe to have their own goddess. As he looked at her, he noticed she didn't seem godly, but rather like a sexy older lady. Seeing him deep in thought, the goddess asked if he was thinking something inappropriate. He quickly denied it, so she let it go. The goddess explained that she granted him power because tens of millions of goblins had died cruelly over countless cycles, treated as weak and powerless life forms. Though they were seen as the weakest, that was also why they were the strongest. The protagonist was confused, so the goddess clarified that due to inheritance and reincarnation, he had now inherited all the knowledge and darkness of her fallen brethren. When tens of millions of the weakest goblins came together, they formed one being of incredible power. She also revealed that his sister wasn't the only one he could save. Before leaving, she told him she was leaving the future of their dying tribe in his hands. The protagonist woke up, looked at his hand, and decided to fulfill his duty by creating a world free of oppression. He filled out the entrance exam application for the Academy of Dark Magic. The Goblin Fairy asked if he was sure his plan would work, and he answered confidently. Looking out the window, he said he wanted to create a world where his sister and everyone from the hidden village could live peacefully. To do that, his first target was one of the 7 greats of the Demon Lord's army, the cruel King Duel, who ruled over the region. The Academy of Dark Magic was a training ground for recruits in Duel's domain, and he was also the founder of the academy. If the protagonist entered the school and became a cadet, he could meet Duel and have a chance to strike him down. He said goodbye to his sister in the hidden village, but before he could leave, Lily told him to be careful. The Goblin Fairy, having finished her work in the hidden village, decided to join him on his journey. In the cruel King Duel's domain in the castle town, our protagonist was about to head to the Dark Magic Academy when he suddenly heard someone scolding another. When he looked in the direction of the voice, he saw a pig with his slave. The slave had failed to complete a simple task, so the pig kicked her, saying it was enough because he was going to be late. People around them whispered that the pig was causing trouble again and felt sorry for the goblin slave. The Goblin Fairy felt disgusted by how the pig was treating the lower tribes. Our protagonist remembered that this pig was Bradley, the slave merchant in the game. Bradley was a low-ranking demon aristocrat who made a lot of money through illegal activities such as trading slaves, crime, and breaking contracts. Our protagonist was happy his knowledge of the character from his obsession with the art book would be useful now. He was also excited to test the abilities of his new heroic spirit companions. He looked at the fairy and said they would help the slave. The Goblin Fairy agreed, saying she expected him to say that. In an alley, our protagonist knelt on his right knee, placed his hand near the ground and cast a spell to summon the Goblin Girl. A purple light appeared from the magic circle, and as a pillar of light rose, thick legs with tattoos became visible. Slowly, a girl began to form. With dark blue hair, she raised her arm showing her green skin. As she mumbled about how nice it was to be alive again, she looked at her master and in a musical tone said she would do whatever he asked. The Goblin Fairy, watching this carefree attitude from such an ancient being, was left speechless. Our protagonist then asked the Goblin Girl to do something for him. The scene shifted, and Bradley appeared very angry as he scolded the goblin slave. He said he knew she was cheap, but he didn't expect her to be this useless. The poor slave lay on the ground while people murmured. When the protagonist arrived, Bradley asked what he wanted. The protagonist told him to stop hurting the slave, but Bradley explained that she was his slave, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. When the protagonist asked if Bradley was really going to continue hurting the slave no matter what, Bradley agreed. But when the protagonist offered to buy her for 100 times her original price, Bradley was shocked and only said, "What?" Bradley revealed he bought the slave for 30 gold coins and asked if the protagonist would pay 100 times that amount. The protagonist confirmed, and when the Goblin Girl threw the bags of gold, Bradley was stunned. He asked if the gold was really 3,000 and the protagonist said yes. He then asked if they had a deal. The greedy Bradley quickly grabbed the bags of gold and promised not to return it, even if the protagonist changed his mind. After Bradley left in his carriage, the slave goblin asked why the protagonist had helped her. He knelt down and explained that he was actually a goblin like her, so he wanted to help. He reassured her that she was safe now. The slave goblin was confused and asked why he would spend so much on her. The protagonist told her not to worry and explained that the gold coins weren't actually his. He had learned from the game where Bradley hid his money. The protagonist asked the Goblin Girl to take the coins. Since she had the skills stealth and penetration, she easily sneaked into Bradley's wagon, stole the gold coins, and put them in the bags. The protagonist felt fine with it since the coins were earned through crime, and he believed slavery shouldn't exist. He reached out his hand, and when the slave took it, she thanked him. He still had to go to the academy for the entrance exam. The protagonist ordered the Goblin Fairy to guide the slave to the hidden village. As he walked, the protagonist thought that he needed to reach the top of the academy to complete his plan. When he arrived at the main gate of the Academy of Dark Magic, He remembered that the school always accepted new students to train more elites. However, only those with extraordinary abilities could enroll. Even a low-level monster could join if they had the right skills. He clenched his fist and thought that if he became an elite cadet, he could meet the academy's founder, the cruel King Duel, and defeat him. Upon entering the gate, he noticed a student reminding the entrance exam applicants to line up. When he saw the long line, he sighed and tilted his head. Suddenly, someone tapped his shoulder. It was a blonde girl with long ears, wearing revealing clothes. She apologized and asked if asking if he had any food and anything sweet to eat would be fine. Our protagonist searched his pocket and found some chocolate. He stopped when he realized it was handmade by his sister. He almost put it back, but the girl quickly grabbed it and ate it. After she had finished chewing, the protagonist sat down, looking defeated. The girl scratched her head and thanked him. She said she got hungry when stressed, which caused her to have an inner darkness deficiency. Now that she was feeling better after eating the sweets, she was surprised to see him glaring at her, mumbling that the chocolate was his sister's. Realizing she had made a mistake, she apologized profusely, explaining that she didn't know how important the chocolate was. The protagonist just stared at her. After talking about his sister's effort to make the chocolate, the girl thought he could create his own mana as an apology. She put her hand on her chest and promised to return the favor. She introduced herself as Letty and then asked him his name. The protagonist realized he didn't have one. He couldn't even remember his name from his past life, and he bit his lip. He remembered that only low-class monsters or slaves didn't have names in this world. He thought Letty would probably look down on him. Letty offered to give him a name. She noticed the green color on his face and decided to call him Lime. The protagonist thought it was a strange name, but Letty insisted it was good and said it was nice to meet him. The protagonist was also happy to meet her. Finally, he had a name, saying our protagonist for the past minutes has been tiring. An announcement came from the magic circle, saying the entrance exam would begin soon and telling everyone to gather at the central plaza. After Letty told Lime they should do their best, some people saw Lime. One of them, wearing red, said Lime was part goblin and wondered what a lowlife was doing here. At the Academy of Dark Magic's Central Plaza, an instructor listed the names of those who had passed the magic test. When it was Letty's turn, she slowly gathered her magic into her palm and threw it at the target. Others recognized her as the rumored princess of the evil elves tribe and expected her to have strong magic. Lime was surprised when he heard she was a princess and thought that you couldn't judge a demon by its appearance. He wondered if he should change his attitude towards her. Letty asked how she did, and Lime said it was great and that she would easily pass. Then they were approached by Haig, a vampire. He told Lime that he didn't expect to see trash in the exam and asked if he wasn't a servant of Butch anymore. He sarcastically asked if Lime was here to take the entrance exam, saying that Lime was just a goblin with no darkness magic. Lime turned his head and sighed deeply. Letty shouted at Haig, asking if there was something wrong with taking the exam. She added that Lime was much better than someone so rude. Haig turned his back and before leaving told her to bark all she wanted, adding that the truth would soon be revealed. Letty was about to get really angry but calmed down and turned to Lime, telling him to do his best. After Lime said he would, he looked at the dummy target. He thought that if he gave it his all, he could destroy everything. He had always wanted to test the full power given to him, but he realized he needed to control it now so he wouldn't wreck the place. When the instructor rudely told him to hurry up, Lime closed his eyes and used his fingertips to release dark magic. Although he tried to control it, a huge wave of dark magic almost knocked everyone over. As the smoke cleared, a large part of the plaza was destroyed and the instructor looked shocked. Lime couldn't believe he hadn't fully controlled his power. Haig was also shocked. Excited, Letty jumped up in amazement, impressed by him. Lime scratched the back of his head, and since he made a mistake controlling his power, he covered it up by telling Letty that he had just gotten lucky and suddenly managed to use high-level magic. After the written exam, they took a break. Seeing the trouble on Letty's face, Lime asked if something was wrong. Letty said she was worried because there was a subject she wasn't good at on the written exam and asked if Lime's exam went well. Lime replied that he thought his exam was fine and remembered it was like answering quiz questions related to a game, which he did easily. He looked up and saw Haig walking towards him. Haig started spouting nonsense, saying that the magic test earlier was just a fluke, so Lime shouldn't get too carried away. He didn't believe a goblin like Lime could use any magic. Lime put his left hand on his waist and told Haig that he should worry about himself instead of focusing on him. Haig got angry and was about to draw his sword, but he stopped when he heard the announcement that the combat exam was about to start. All the examiners had to go to the central plaza. Haig clicked his tongue in frustration and told Lime that he was lucky, but he would remember this. The instructor explained that this year's exam would be different. Instead of a one-on-one battle between the examinees, there would be a new challenge. He revealed that all the examinees had one target this time. The examinees were confused, so the instructor explained that this new policy was set by Lord Do-Yul, the founder of the academy. He added that a student worthy of this academy must be able to survive against an even stronger opponent. The massive gate slowly opened and all the examinees stared at it, wondering who their opponent would be. When the gate fully opened, they saw a huge monster with glowing yellow eyes. It was a thunder dragon, which Lime recognized from the end of the game. He couldn't believe it and asked if the thunder dragon was really their target. As he questioned it, some of the applicants ran for their lives. The thunder dragon released a blast of lightning, and after a huge explosion, the examinees were left lying on the ground. Haig panicked because he had never heard of this. Letty glared at the dragon, clenched her fist, and rushed toward it. Lime tried to stop her, but Letty was determined to pass the exam, and for the sake of everyone in the kingdom, she used the windbind spell to try to trap the dragon. She was about to fire a wind arrow but froze when she saw that the windbind was destroyed. The dragon stared at her, and as it prepared to attack, she closed her eyes thinking she was going to die. However, when she realized nothing had happened, she opened her eyes and saw Lime blocking the dragon with his massive barrier. Lime, who was standing casually, asked if Letty was okay. When she said she was fine, Lime told her to wait a bit because he would finish things quickly. Letty was surprised to hear that. The dragon, unable to break the barrier, roared upward to gather its power. The sky darkened and a thunderbolt struck its horn, giving it more strength. The dragon used its head to break the barrier, and after it shot lightning from its mouth, a huge explosion happened. Luckily, Lime was quick enough to dodge the attack and jumped high into the air. Lime found it troublesome that the thunder dragon had entered its super armor state. Looking at the sky, Letty asked if they were really flying. Lime apologized because he hadn't defeated the dragon quickly and told her to wait on the rooftop. He let go of her, and as she fell, she screamed in fear. She landed on a green object and bounced, wondering what it was. The strange blob was a melter goblin jelly summoned by Lime. It was a shapeless creature that couldn't conduct electricity but was weak in dry areas. It instinctively went into hiding when the drought in its home became too harsh. Lime returned to the dragon and used his dark magic, Dark Boost level 54. He asked if the dragon was ready and quickly moved toward it. The dragon attacked with a force that almost pierced the sky. When Lime easily dodged it, the dragon fired multiple fireballs, but Lime avoided them all. Shocked, the dragon saw Lime disappear, only to be surprised when Lime kicked him hard in the face, sending him flying. The dragon crashed into a wall, and as Lime landed, a vampire could be seen running and calling for his mom. The dragon stood up, and the two stared at each other. Lime told the dragon to go all out if it didn't want to lose. The dragon glared back at Lime. The best was very angry and roared loudly to call more lightning. Lime disappeared and appeared behind Hog with a quick movement. He quickly grabbed Haga's sword and said he would borrow it. He turned his head but was surprised to see no one behind him. Lime flew up into the sky and used his elemental coating level 49. Thunder moved toward the sword as he raised it, which confused the dragon. After gathering enough power, Lime shouted the skill Dark Sword, Thunderbolt, and threw it at the dragon. The dragon was shocked to see the similar power heading toward him. In an instant, the ground cracked when the attack hit, causing a loud noise that echoed through the entire academy grounds. When the smoke cleared, the thunder dragon was seen lying lifeless on the ground. Lime looked at the screen and learned that he was now at Awakening level 3. He also acquired the demonic sword Mjolnir, which he got from defeating the thunder dragon. Seeing his talent, the instructor decided to report it to the dean. Meanwhile, the others, including Letty, were shocked by what happened. Lime thought he had passed the test. Several hours later, after the combat test, the two looked up to see the results. They saw that only 2 people had passed, and they were the ones. Letty told Lime that he had played a big role in defeating the dragon and said it didn't make sense for her to be included as one of the passers. Lime figured the school must have judged her based on how she faced the dragon without hesitation. Letty happily agreed with his explanation. When Lime asked about her full name, Letty said it was Tiara Letty, but she just went by Letty because it was easier to say. Then, Letty got an idea. She picked up a pen and wrote Lime's name on the leaderboard to fix the unnamed student. She looked at Lime and said she had already given him a name. Lime blushed and shyly scratched his face when he heard that. A while later, the two of them were seen standing before the instructor, wearing their uniforms since they were now official students of the academy. Letty was excited. The instructor, who had green hair, handed them their grimoire and robes. After Lime put on the robe, the instructor told them that they would take a placement test before they could officially join. Lime asked if it was another test, and the instructor confirmed. He explained that the test would measure their level of darkness, which would determine the class and dormitory they would join. While the instructor set up a machine, the other students looked at the two newcomers. The instructor mentioned that he was curious to see where they would be placed. Some of the students whispered that the exam was difficult this year, and that only 2 people had passed. When they saw the 2 newcomers, they didn't think it would be a big deal. Letty got angry when she heard them, but Lime stopped her and told her to stay calm because now wasn't the time. After listening to him, she calmed down. Lime then asked the instructor to explain the placement exam. The instructor explained that they just needed to stand in front of a magical machine, which would measure their darkness levels. If they touched the screen, their results would be shown. He proudly mentioned that the machine was a new gift from the school, and smiled strangely as he assured them that there was no way to cheat. The instructor called Letty to go first. Letty placed her hand on the machine to check the results. The instructor was shocked and couldn't believe what he saw. He was surprised when he saw her result, while the instructor couldn't believe how high Letty's score was. Letty's inner darkness value was around 200,000. Lime noticed that it looked like a status window and thought Letty could become a strong fighter with training. After looking at her score, he saw her dorm listed as the Lucifer dorm. Knowing it was the highest-ranking dorm, the students were amazed and whispered that Letty was one of the rare evil elves. The instructor then called Lime. When Lime placed his hand on the machine, the instructor sighed, expecting nothing from a mere goblin. Even though Lime already knew the result of his last awakening, he was still curious to see how much it had improved. He poured all his darkness into the machine, and as the machine shook, the instructor wondered what was happening. The machine suddenly broke apart with a loud crash, creating a strong wind, which caused a bit of chaos and a pervy moment. Lime, worried about what he had done, looked at the instructor, who was shocked. Lime was also surprised because he hadn't expected the machine to break. The instructor was angry because his expensive machine worth 500 gold coins was destroyed. Lime scratched his head and suggested there might have been a mistake with the machine, but the instructor angrily explained that it was impossible since the machine was brand new. He wondered what he should tell the dean. Lime apologized, but the instructor, still angry, pointed at him and shouted that it was enough. Since the machine couldn't measure him, he decided to place Lime in the lowest-ranking dorm. Most of the students were shocked by this, but Lime thought it was bad because his plan of becoming an elite cadet seemed impossible now. He needed to find a way to improve his situation. Meanwhile, with a serious expression, the instructor from the combat test had witnessed everything. Later, at the Academy of Dark Magic's lowest-ranked Seer dorm, Lime sat down on his bed. As he looked at his status window, he thought about his goal: to be chosen as an elite cadet and have a chance to meet the cruel King Duel. His plan was to eventually take control of Duel's domain, but being in the lowest dorm made this seem impossible. While he was thinking about the quickest way to prove his worth, Letty came to mind. He thought she could help him move to a higher-ranked dorm, since she was in the highest one. Just as he was thinking this, he noticed a piece of paper inside the grimoire. He picked it up and smiled, realizing it was exactly what he had been looking for. After that, Lime went to the receptionist and said he wanted to join the magic tournament. The tournament was sponsored by the Academy of Dark Magic and happened once a year. It was held to find the school's strongest mage. Only the most skilled students were allowed to enter, and the winner would receive a magical treasure from the school's founder, Duel. Even though Lime couldn't become a cadet, winning the tournament could give him a chance to meet the cruel king. The receptionist asked if it was Lime's second day at the academy. After he confirmed, she warned him that the competition was dangerous and had no restrictions on the use of magic. She also mentioned that students usually had to be enrolled for at least 1 year to participate. Lime said he understood but still wanted to join. The receptionist told him to wait while she reported to her superior, who turned out to be the combat instructor. He assumed it was the student who had broken the measuring device and smiled. The receptionist asked if she should turn Lime away, but the instructor told her to let him join. The receptionist returned to Lime and told him that his application would be accepted, but reminded him that anything that happened in the tournament was at his own risk. Lime nodded, understanding her precautions. He was happy to have found a shortcut to meet and kill the cruel King Duel. At the Academy of Dark Magic's Lucifer dorm, which was only for girls, Letty sat with a red face, thinking about how happy she was to have met him during the entrance exam. She remembered how he had saved her, like a prince, and felt a bit excited. But then she recalled how he had thrown her from the sky, and she shook her head, telling herself to get it together. As she combed her hair, she wondered where she could see him again. She had a feeling he would do great things. Blushing, she thought she couldn't stop thinking about him and couldn't imagine living without him. She suddenly asked herself why her heart was beating so fast. Meanwhile, at the Siri dorm, Lime was about to sleep but suddenly woke up and went to the rooftop. There, he summoned the Goblin Girl and ordered her to use penetration to enter the school's facilities. Noticing her new appearance, Lime asked why an old hag was wearing a school uniform. The Goblin Girl replied that she liked to get in character depending on the situation. Lime told her to investigate the school's facilities. The Goblin Girl responded, promising to do it well. Lime looked up, muttering that the other one should arrive soon. The Goblin Fairy then arrived and reported that she had left the slave girl in Lime's sister's care. Lime thanked her and apologized, saying he had another request. He asked her to map out the entire school. When the Goblin Fairy asked if he really meant to map it out, Lime explained that he wanted a diagram. The Goblin Girl then asked why he hadn't said that earlier, since she could do it quickly. She also asked about his plan. Lime looked at the Dean's Tower and said he would go there for a stealth mission. A moment later, he arrived at the Academy of Dark Magic, standing outside the Dean's Tower. He wore the dark material camo level 45, thinking that it might help him stay undetected. He paused by a window and saw a few people gathered for a meeting. The bearded old man was the school dean, Wesker and Mullane, who was handling the magic tournament. There was also Professor Eddie, a four-eyed combat teacher, and Gaia, the student council president, who was a dragonian with visible horns. Professor Eddie adjusted his glasses and told them that Lime was a threat. After tossing a piece of paper, he said they couldn't predict what the new student could do. He added that Lime didn't belong in their school, which valued noble culture and traditions. Dean Wesker turned to Mullane and asked if it was true that Lime had defeated the Thunder Dragon they released to fail all the examinees. Mullane confirmed it, adding that the Thunder Dragon was meant to protect the school's reputation, but Lime had ruined everything. Wesker scratched his beard and muttered that Lime had incredible strength. Eddie slammed his desk and angrily explained that the students of their school must not only be strong, but also come from respectable demon tribes, with grace and dignity. He said if they allowed lower tribes like the Goblin tribe to ruin that, it would dishonor their great founder, Duel. Wesker asked if they planned to reveal Lime's true nature during the magic tournament. Mullane confirmed this, saying Lime had signed up for the tournament on his own, so whatever happened to him was his responsibility. Mullane also mentioned that the tournament often had unexpected accidents. Wesker sighed heavily, realizing the teachers were as extreme as always. Eddie said they were talking about a goblin who shouldn't be allowed to take the entrance exam. Mullane suggested that if they were letting people like this in, it might be best to stop them now. She added that if no one else would protect the school's traditions, she would. Limes, watching this, thought that even though the rules said everyone had a fair chance to enroll, their actions made him believe the higher-ups were corrupt. Wesker looked to the side as if he noticed something. He paused for a moment, then stood up and said he understood the situation. He told them they could leave because he was going to bed. After leaving the office, Mullane looked at the door and wondered if the dean really understood. Eddie told Gaia he was planning to change the tournament brackets so that Lime would face a student from Gaia's group. He wanted Gaia to cause an unexpected accident and asked him to protect the school's reputation. Gaia said he understood. Seeing that Gaia was a dragonian, Lime thought he had found a worthy opponent. Mullane laughed at Eddie, saying he would use the highest rank just to deal with a simple goblin. Eddie angrily slammed the table, telling her it wasn't something to laugh about. After thinking for a moment, Lime vanished from the scene. A short time later, the three met on the rooftop where they reported to Lime. Goblin Girl told him that there was a hidden entrance to an underground warehouse behind the last bookshelf in the Library of Great Magic. After Goblin Fairy handed over the bird's-eye view map of the school, Lime thanked them. He then looked around and noticed a man practicing with a sword. It was late at night, and Lime admired the man. Goblin Girl explained that the man was a kobold, another low-ranking tribe living in the same dorm as Lime. She had seen him there while she was mapping the school. Lime realized he couldn't easily overlook the school anymore. The two returned to the dorm. Seeing Goblin Fairy lying on his bed, Lime asked why she was trying to sleep there. Goblin Fairy sighed and said she was a super adorable fairy. She asked how someone like her could sleep on the floor. She then teasingly asked if he didn't want to sleep with her and if she should seduce him. Lime refused as he would just crush her due to the difference in size. Goblin Fairy then had an idea. A cloud of pink smoke appeared, and when it cleared, a seductive pair of large mountains appeared. She asked, "How about now?" But it had no effect on Lime. She laughed and said she was just kidding. She added that the goddess would probably give her a lecture if she seduced him, and his sister would probably get mad too. She transformed back to her usual form, lay on the bed, and wished him good night. Lime summarized what he learned from the stealth mission. Looking at the map, he thought he would be busy starting the next day. The following morning, students ate in the Academy of Dark Magic's dining hall. While Lime was eating, he noticed Letty from a distance. She was happily talking to others. Letty saw him and waved, asking him to come over. Lime waved back and turned down her invitation because he knew it wasn't a good idea to sit at the same table with girls from the highest-ranked dorm. He then looked at a piece of paper and remembered there were only 5 days left until the magic tournament. Suddenly, someone asked if they could sit with him, and Lime agreed. The kobold thanked him. Lime recognized him from the previous night. The kobold told Lime he was from the Siri dorm too, and Lime said he was looking forward to working with him. When the kobold asked if it was true that Lime had applied for the magic tournament, Lime confirmed it. The kobold smiled and said he had also applied. Just then, a student named Nero shouldered the kobold aside and angrily asked who allowed him to eat there. Lime looked at Nero and the kobold asked him if it really mattered where he ate. Nero yelled, saying that a low-ranking monster like the kobold wasn't allowed to sit there. He said the only time the kobold could be there was when he was delivering something. The kobold replied that there was no rule like that. Nero was about to attack him when Lime stepped in. He called out Nero and grabbed his arm. Nero asked was his deal. Lime answered that he was just a goblin, another low-ranked monster, and asked if Nero was saying he couldn't be there either because of that. Nero asked if Lime was new and said he would teach him the rules with his fists. Lime calmly said Nero could try and teach him. As the two stared each other down, the kobold mumbled to himself, thinking this had happened because of him. Nero threw a punch and said that a newcomer like Lime should learn to mind his own business. Lime easily blocked the punch, surprising both Nero and kobold. Lime grabbed Nero's arm, and as he tightened his grip, he thought that causing a scene would give him a bad impression on the other students, so he decided to handle it quietly. Nero dropped to his knee, groaning in pain, and asked to be let go. After Lime released him, a mark was left on Nero's arm. Nero knelt on the ground, looking defeated as Lime addressed him. Lime explained that anyone was free to come to the cafeteria. One of Nero's comrades told him that Lime was the freshman from the rumor who had defeated the Thunder Dragon with one strike. Hearing this, Nero was shocked. As he stood up, he told his comrade that they should leave. Before leaving, he pointed at Lime and said that he already knew the Dragonian faction. Breath of Flame was watching him. Nero smirked and wondered how long Lime would last in the tournament. In response, Lime just sighed. The kobold thanked Lime and apologized for getting him involved. Lime said it was fine. The kobold explained that although he had joined the tournament to test his strength and surprise others, he didn't think he had a chance of winning, and it seemed laughable. After Lime introduced himself, the kobold revealed his name as Loot Arcadia. Lime's eyes widened, and he asked if he was really Loot. Loot confirmed it and asked if Lime knew him. Lime responded that he didn't know much, but he remembered that Loot Arcadia was the man who would hunt the hero's forces to the end. He was also the one who would become the most powerful knight in the Dark Knight's order. A little while later, the two returned to Seer Dorm after saying their goodbyes. Loot was surprised when Lime called him, so he asked what it was about. Lime asked if it was okay for him to join Loot in his midnight training session. Loot was surprised that Lime knew about it, but still welcomed him. Lime then became serious and said that, if he remembered correctly, Loot's younger sister was part of the Nun of the Dark Church within the territory of the demon god Shinel, one of the Great Seven. Loot was shocked and wondered how Lime knew about this, but Lime explained that he had heard it through rumors. Lime told Loot to listen carefully and continued, saying that in the near future, Loot's younger sister would go to a village near the human world for missionary work. When that happened, Loot needed to tell her to come straight home and not stop or look back. Lime said he was asking this as repayment for Loot helping him back in the dining hall and that Loot should honor the favor. After Loot agreed, the two said goodbye. A goblin fairy flew behind Lime, crossing her arms, and asked if he was planning something. Lime replied that it was just a bit. He then thought that what he had done was to change Loot's fate because the death of his sister was what caused Loot to fall to the dark side. Lime had decided to awaken Loot's power while making sure his sister stayed alive. Several days later, at the Academy of Dark Magic, Lime stood in front of some round targets hanging from a tree. He gathered purple magic in his hand and threw it at the targets. Behind him, Loot was sleeping, or at least he seemed very focused. When he opened his eyes, he grabbed his sword and swung it toward a waterfall. He was happy to see that the target had been cut in half. Loot was excited and looked at Lime, amazed by how quickly his sword skills were improving. Lime told him it was because of the hard work Loot had put in. Loot thanked Lime for the advice, impressed by Lime's magic and sword skills. He wondered why Lime was placed in the lowest rank. Lime thanked him for the compliment. During their break, Loot looked at his sword and remembered that the tournament was the next day. He told Lime that it would probably be their last midnight training session. Lime told him to listen carefully, saying that Loot was doing a great job. The effort Loot put in was amazing, and his steady training and positive attitude were his greatest strengths. However, Lime realized something during their training. Loot's true potential still hadn't been unlocked. When Loot asked what that meant, Lime explained that it came from something deeply painful, a kind of pain Loot had never wanted to feel. Although Lime didn't want him to experience it, without it, Loot might never realize his full potential. Loot awkwardly chuckled and said he didn't understand. Lime then told him to close his eyes for a moment. When Loot did, Lime used a dark magic technique called Sinister Analysis. His eyes glowed purple as he discovered that most of the darkness in Loot's body was inactive, like he was running full speed while carrying a heavy weight. Lime was impressed that Loot had gotten so far despite this hidden burden. He believed that if Loot could break free from this weight, his power would grow. Loot could awaken on his own without needing to experience the tragedy of his sister's death. Lime's hand turned into a claw, and he quickly punched Loot in the chest, telling him not to move. Loot was shocked. Lime patted his shoulder and said everything was fine now. As Lime walked away, Loot held his chest, feeling something sharp pierce through him. Lime told him they should rest since the next day was important, and Loot agreed. The next day at the Academy of Dark Magic's Coliseum, the opening ceremony of the Magic Tournament began with loud cheers. The participants entered the arena, and the students became even more excited when Melaine announced that the tournament had officially started. She reminded everyone not to miss a single moment of the event and said that the speech from the school's founder, Duel, would signal the start of the tournament. A magic circle appeared on the wall, revealing a glitchy hologram of Duel. Lime thought it looked similar to his goblin summoning, but quickly realized it was just a hologram. Cruel King Duel spoke to his students, telling them that the future of his demon army depended on how well they showed their abilities in battle. He said there was only one rule: those without strength must give up on their own. After Duel finished speaking, the crowd punched their fists into the air and cheered loudly. However, Lime stayed silent and didn't cheer. As he looked at Duel's hologram, he remembered how Duel's heavy taxes and persecution had caused suffering in the hidden village. Lime glared at the hologram and promised himself that he would win the tournament and bring Duel down. Later, Lime leaned on the wall while holding the tournament bracket and learned that there were 128 participants. This meant he had to win 6 matches before reaching the finals. Since stamina wasn't an issue for him, he planned to give his best from the start. While trying to figure out who his opponent would be, a cold glass of juice touched his face, making him scream in surprise and startling everyone around him. He mumbled, "What the?" when Letty cheerfully said she didn't know Lime could be so loud. They sat on a bench and Letty told him she had seen him in the contestant area from the audience. She had called out to him, but he didn't respond. Lime explained he hadn't heard her because of the loud cheering, but Letty didn't believe him. She was still happy because they finally met. Letty then asked about something she had heard. Only students who had been enrolled for more than a year could enter the tournament. Lime told her that was a common misconception. She sipped her drink and said she understood. Lime asked if something was wrong and Letty said it was nothing. She mentioned that Lime seemed strange because he had entered a tournament against the school's strongest fighter right after enrolling. Lime looked at her with wide eyes and Letty asked what was wrong. He chuckled and told her not to mind him. In his head he thought if he told Letty she looked strange, she would probably get mad. Letty mumbled that Lime always acted so grown up. Suddenly she remembered something and extended her hand to give him something. When Lime accepted it, he wondered what it was. He saw it was a box of chocolates, and he wondered if it was a payment for when they first met. He noticed that Letty's hand had band-aids on it. She told him she felt bad for eating his sister's homemade snacks all this time. When Lime asked if she had made the chocolates herself, Letty blushed and said she did. She quickly warned him not to get the wrong idea, saying it was just a token of apology and not anything more. When Lime asked what she meant, Letty covered her face in embarrassment and couldn't finish her sentence, just saying, "Never mind." Lime thanked her, saying it made him happy. Deep down, he liked this kind of human connection. After checking the time, Letty gave him a fist bump and wished him good luck. They said goodbye, but as Letty walked away, she blushed when she noticed her heart was racing and wondered why. In the first match of the Magic Tournament, the Magic Circle welcomed the contestants. It was Lime the Goblin from Sierra Dorm against Orphan Escudo, the Dragonian from Lucifer Dorm, a proud member of the Breath of Flame faction. The girls blushed and cheered for Orphan, shouting for him to wipe the floor with the Goblin. Meanwhile, Melaine wondered why Eddie had sent the second-best student to fight a mere goblin. Eddie replied that he wasn't there to play games. Wesker stood silently. On the arena, the referee asked if Lime was sure he wouldn't use a weapon, and Lime confirmed. Orphan muttered that Lime was underestimating him. When the battle started, Orphan quickly jumped to finish Lime and used his Dragonian form, Wyvern, growing a pair of dragon wings. Seeing this, the others realized Orphan was serious about ending the fight quickly. With his elemental coating level 20, Orphan rushed toward Lime, aiming to turn the low-ranked goblin into ashes. As Lime thought about how boring the battle would be, the ground suddenly cracked. Chains with plant veins shot up, instantly binding Lime. Worried, Letty wondered what was happening. As Orphan got closer, he thought that no one had said the battle would be fair and shouted for Lime to die by his hand. Lime just watched Orphan approach. Lime looked to the side and noticed the person behind the chains. She was Ren-U, the third in command of the Breath of Flame faction. In her green dragon form, she could control all types of plants. A huge explosion happened when Orphan struck Lime. While some spectators panicked, thinking Orphan had won the fight, Letty was more worried about Lime's safety. As the smoke cleared, it showed Lime blocking Orphan's attack with the demonic sword Mjolnir. Orphan shouted that it was impossible, but Lime only gave him a cold stare before vanishing. She reappeared behind Orphan and used the sword's handle to knock him out. Once Orphan was unconscious, Lime asked the referee if the match was over. When the referee announced Lime as the winner, the crowd cheered loudly, leaving two shocked teachers speechless. Wesker, scratching his beard, thought Lime had done a great job hiding his true power. He already noticed Lime's darkness levels were already at an SSS rank. Letty jumped from her seat, amazed by how incredible Lime was. After the fight, Lime was greeted by his sister Lily, Goblin Fairy, and the Slave Goblin. Goblin Fairy explained that she had disguised the other two as students so they could watch the tournament. Lily excitedly told Lime how amazing he was, while the Slave Goblin said he looked really cool. Seeing how happy they were, Lime smiled and patted their heads. Lily then handed Lime a round piece of bread which looked like a pie, saying she and Mayu had made it. Lime was pleased that the slave goblin now had a name and thanked them for the food. A shy Mew wished him luck in his next match, and Lily told him he would win. Lime confidently replied that he would win the tournament for sure. A while later, Lime stood up in the waiting room, realizing it was time for the second match. Suddenly, a girl ran up to him and said that the person who had been with him earlier had collapsed. This news worried Lime, so he asked her to take him to the scene. As he ran, he could only think about Lily. When he arrived in an empty area, he asked where his companions were. The girl revealed her true self and with a teasing tone said she wondered where they could be. Then she trapped him. Lime admitted he hadn't expected to be tricked by someone like her. He realized he had let his guard down after seeing his sister earlier. After a closer look, he recognized her as Ren, the same girl who had helped Orphan a while ago. Lime asked if she was part of Breath of Flame, but Ren didn't answer and just laughed. Lime destroyed the plant entangling him and told her the same trick wouldn't work on him twice, but Ren said they already knew that. She explained they were only there to keep him busy. More Dragonians then appeared and surrounded Lime. Just then, Gaia appeared. He said they didn't care about the tournament anymore because the whole order of Dragonians planned to fight Lime right there and then. Pointing at Lime, Gaia declared that he would die in this place and no one would notice. His death would look like an accident. Lime stayed silent. Seeing this, Ren asked if he was too scared to speak because he was going to be late for the tournament. Lime calmly declared that he would finish this in 3 minutes. Hearing that made Gaia furious. The Dragonian released his power and warned him to prepare for death. Lime, however, released his own dark power and told him that he was the one who needed to be ready. Lime was determined to use all of his dark energy at full strength. He then told Gaia they had to finish the fight before the second round. Gaia transformed into Dragonian form, Salamander, while Lime calmly activated his dark magic elemental coating level 38. Gaia shouted at Lime, telling him to take his conflagration blast. Lime blocked the powerful attack with his palm and countered by using his dark magic destruction veil. After the massive explosion, another Dragonian appeared behind Lime and called him a fool, saying his back was exposed. But before he could strike, Lime blocked the attack with his demonic sword, Mjolnir, and used his dark magic flare bomb, which caused the attacker to cry out in pain. Gaia yelled that he wasn't finished and unleashed a huge fireball, followed by another Dragonian's magic attack. They mocked Lime, saying he could rest in peace since he was surrounded. However, Lime just stared at them. When a massive explosion followed their combined attack, they celebrated, thinking they had won. But their joy turned to shock when they felt Lime's presence again. Each one groaned in pain as Lime struck them one by one. Gaia was stunned and froze in place. Lime took the opportunity and struck with a single powerful attack that looked like a railgun, defeating almost all of their enemies. Seeing this, Gaia activated his Salamander final form and rushed forward, declaring it would end there. Lime, in response, used his dark magic dark boost, and delivered a powerful punch to Gaia's large chin, snapping his head back. But Lime wasn't done yet. He gathered more energy in his fist and hit Gaia with another strong punch. The blow was painful and left Gaia moaning in agony before he collapsed to the ground. When Gaia became unconscious, he transformed back into his human form. Lime wiped the dirt from his uniform and called for Ren. When she approached, he asked how long the fight had taken. Panicking, Ren quickly looked at the clock and said it lasted 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Lime then started walking, saying he had made it in time for the tournament. Scared, Ren dropped to her knees. At the tournament, during the second round, the participants' names were announced. When Lime's Dragonian opponent didn't show up, Lime was declared the winner. According to the rules, any student who fails to appear on time loses by default. Lime realized that his opponent was probably one of the Dragonians he had defeated earlier. Seeing what happened confused the two teachers on the other side. Eddie stood up angrily, asking what was happening. "Man, isn't your dear Dragonians were just too weak for Lime?" Wesker stroked his beard and smiled, wondering what might have happened. Letty, on the other hand, was just happy Lime won by doing nothing. Lily and Mew happily celebrated Lime's easy win even though they weren't sure how it happened. Lime's opponents didn't show up for the third match or the one after that, so he was declared the winner repeatedly. He figured most of his opponents were Dragonians, whom he had already defeated earlier. Eddie grew more and more stressed every time the announcer declared Lime the winner. For the final match, after the participants were announced, Lime was happy to see Lute step forward to face him. Looking at Lute's stats, Lime noticed he had already awakened his Dark Knight job class, and was surprised by how much Lute had improved. When Lute thanked him for helping him grow this far, Lime thought it was a good thing. He believed Lute could now save his sister and said he was happy to see him. Lute started to draw his sword and asked if they should begin, but he stopped midway. Instead, he raised his hand and said he wanted to forfeit. He explained that he was grateful to Lime and wanted to give him the victory as a token of thanks. For Lime, this didn't feel like thanks at all. His real wish was to have a duel with Lute. He told Lute that if he truly wanted to thank him, he should fight. Lime unsheathed his sword as Lute asked if he was sure. After drawing his weapon, Lute warned Lime that he might not be able to hold back. Lime didn't mind. He thought Lute had grown so much and was excited to finally fight him. After the two shouted that they had to do this, the referee announced the start of the battle. As soon as they heard it, the two vanished from their spots, causing a massive explosion that filled the arena with dust. Their swords clashed, and they stared at each other with intense focus. Lime thought about how the strong winds and pressure were expected from a man destined to become the strongest warrior. When Lute swung his sword, Lime disappeared. After Lute sheathed his sword and prepared for another attack, Lime reflected on the unique ability of Dark Knights. He noted that their special trait was releasing a vast amount of darkness from their bodies as magic. Lute used this darkness to boost his physical strength. As Lute swung his sword with magic-enhanced power, Lime blocked the attack. However, he thought Lute was still inexperienced. Lime suddenly rushed forward with incredible speed to attack. Watching this, Lily mumbled that her brother's opponent was strong while Mew cheered for Lime. Letty stood in shock at the intense fight, and Eddie and Melaine cheered for Lute, shouting that they didn't care which student he faced. They just wanted him to defeat the goblin. The sparks from their swords and the light from their movements lit up the arena as the two fought fiercely. After one final clash, Lime tripped and lost his balance. Lute seized the chance to finish the battle and rushed forward, but Lime barely dodged the attack. Using his sword, Lime cut through Lute's blade. Holding his sword tightly with both hands, Lime declared in a loud voice that this was the end. Lime swung his sword hard, but Lute managed to dodge it and jump back. They stared at each other. Lime realized that Lute had avoided his attack at the last moment, which made him excited about their fight. Lute noticed his blade had been cut in half, so he threw it aside. Lime did the same and put his sword back into his inventory. Lute wondered why Lime did that. In Lime's mind, he knew that Dark Knights were weak against tricky spells and illusions, so he decided to fight Lute directly to see his full potential. Lime signaled for Lute to come closer. Lute said that Lime was underestimating him, but Lime explained that he trusted Lute's abilities and just wanted to enjoy a real fight. As Lute gathered his power, he warned Lime not to regret his words. Lime only smiled. Feeling the intense energy between the two, the referee panicked and ran away as fast as he could to save himself. The two rushed toward each other, and as they clashed, Lute felt strange. Even though the battle was intense, he was excited. He wanted to win against Lime, but at the same time, he didn't want the fight to end. With every hit they exchanged, Lute felt a stronger desire to grow more powerful. Their fists were about to collide, and when they did, a bright flash of light appeared from the impact. Lime slid backward from the force, staring at Lute with surprise. Lime realized that Lute was getting stronger as the fight went on. Knowing this could become dangerous, Lime decided to end the battle with his next attack. As Lime prepared for his final blow, Lute didn't flinch. Lime was shocked to see that his attack didn't hit. Looking back at Lute, he noticed something unusual. During Lute's counterattack, Lime wondered if Lute had just used the Dark Knight's highest skill, Time Stop. Lime wasn't ready for this and couldn't believe Lute had become this powerful. Even so, Lime believed he was still stronger. Determined, he poured all his remaining energy into one last punch. But Lute blocked it with his arms crossed, then grabbed Lime's hand and delivered a sharp kick to his stomach. To Lime's surprise, he vanished right after the attack. Lute thought it might have been an illusion, but before he could react, his body was flung across the arena and crashed into a wall. Groaning in pain, Lute fell to the ground, landing on his knees before collapsing completely. He lost consciousness. As Lime watched Lute lying on the ground, the referee announced him as the winner. Lime slowly walked toward Lute. When he got closer, he looked at him for a moment before saying that Lute had grown stronger. During the award ceremony, as Dean Wesker was about to give Lime the trophy, Eddie and Melaine hesitantly congratulated Lime for winning the tournament. After Lime thanked them, Wesker handed him the trophy and said that Master Duel would personally give him the magical treasure later. Lime understood and was about to leave, but the dean stopped him and asked who he really was. Seeing Lime's confused expression, Wesker explained that in just a week at the academy, Lime had defeated all the strongest elites in the school. He also mentioned the incident outside the tournament, where Lime faced off against all the Dragonians. As Wesker looked at him, he called Lime an irregular, who broke all the usual rules of logic. Wesker also assumed that Lime already knew that the tournament had been set him up. Hearing this, Eddie and Melaine were shocked and became nervous. The students in the audience started murmuring among themselves. Wesker promised to hold everyone involved in the scheme accountable, including himself. He bowed deeply to Lime and sincerely apologized for being part of the plan against him. Lime quickly asked Wesker to lift his head and explained that he was just another student fighting to win the championship. Looking at Wesker, Lime thought the dean still had some kindness in him, even if he was a demon. Wesker accepted Lime's explanation and asked feedbacks about the academy's current issues. Lime thought for a moment and mentioned that the school's enrollment process was supposed to be fair. However, he felt disappointed because, as a goblin, a low-rank monster, he had been mocked by the upper ranks. He added that Lute, a kobold, faced similar treatment. Even so, Lime believed the school itself wasn't bad. He advised Wesker to focus on students' abilities instead of their backgrounds. Eddie and Mullane gritted their teeth as Lime went on to say that corrupt instructors would only produce corrupt students. Wesker agreed and announced that he would fire the two teachers as starters. Lime smiled while Eddie and Mullane were shocked and couldn't believe they were losing their jobs. Later, Lime and Lute met at a spot in the academy. They congratulated each other. Lime for winning the tournament and Lute for taking second place. Lute mentioned how much fun he had fighting with all his strength, and Lime asked if he could ask a question. Lute agreed, but he was surprised when Lime said he would be leaving soon because he had something important to do. Lime promised to return one day and extended his hand, asking if Lute would be his ally when that time came. Lute said yes, but Lime then asked if he would stay his ally even if it meant going against the Demon Lord's army. This caught Lute off guard and he asked what Lime meant. Lime didn't explain and simply waited for a yes or no answer. Lute smiled, closed his eyes, and shook Lime's hand, promising to stand by him no matter what happened. Lime thanked him and advised Lute to improve his fighting style, saying it was too straightforward. He suggested Lute practice against trickier opponents. Lute agreed to take his advice and they said their goodbyes. Outside the academy, Lily and Mew greeted Lime warmly and congratulated him on his win. Lily excitedly planned to brag about her older brother's success to everyone in the village. Mew asked Lime if he could visit their village, even if only for the day. Lime smiled, patted her head, and thanked them both for their support. Meanwhile, behind a tree, Letty was secretly watching. She felt jealous and wondered what class the two cute girls were from. She scolded herself for hiding and called herself foolish, thinking she should just approach Lime like normal. Not long after, Lime became a level 4 awakener and unlocked a new ability called Fast Travel. In the hidden village of goblins, it had only been a week since Lime left, but it felt like much longer to him. When some goblins saw their messiah, they quickly spread the news to others. The children, excited by his return, wanted to play with him. Some thought he looked really cool because of the unusual clothes he was wearing. When Lime spotted the village chief, the elder pointed towards the gardens. In the elder's mind, he felt grateful to Lime because the village had become much better. The advice Lime gave before leaving had been very helpful. Lime remembered the day he spoke with the village chief about the village's problems. Back then, Lime noticed that the land was infertile and the water had dried up, making it impossible to grow crops or fruit. This made it hard for the villagers to survive. The chief was aware of this but felt they had no choice but to live with it. Lime told him they could fix the problem and revealed that someone had defiled the land on purpose. When the elder asked if this was true, Lime confirmed it and explained that a malicious contamination spell had been cast over the entire village. Most goblins couldn't see the spell, but Lime assured them that cleansing it would restore the land's fertility and allow the village to thrive again. The chief then asked how Lime planned to fix it. Lime responded that he would destroy the spell. As he looked at the contamination magic circle in the center of the village, he remembered how, in the game, weak goblins would never have been targeted by such a spell. It became clear to him that someone was deliberately trying to harm the goblin population. Lime carefully observed the magic circle and memorized its pattern. Then, with one swing of his sword, he completely destroyed the contamination spell that the other goblins couldn't see. Afterward, Lime thought about how this added another enemy to his list. He told the elder that they could now rest easily. Fresh water would flow from underground again, and crops could grow in the fields. In the present time, when Lily and Mew asked if he wanted to try their home cooking, the children around them became excited, eager to taste it too. After some time, they had a feast in the village with Lily and Mew's cooking. During the meal, Lime mentioned that he really enjoyed their food. He also said the villagers seemed happier and livelier, as if hope had returned to them. He thought they would be even more joyful if the Goblin Goddess appeared now, but it was not yet the right time. The next morning, Lily and Mew greeted Lime cheerfully, saying good morning, and he returned their greeting with a smile. When Lime mentioned he was about to leave, Lily asked if he had finished preparing. Mew seemed surprised and said it felt too soon for him to go. Lime thanked Lily for the tea she made the day before, saying it helped him rest well. Lily replied that it was no problem. Shyly, Mew gave Lime a bracelet and revealed that she and Lily had made it together. It was a good luck charm meant to help him always win in battle. Lime thanked them, and the two reminded him to take good care of it. After wishing him a safe journey, the Goblin Fairy told Lime it was time to face the Cruel King duel. Lime knew how powerful the Cruel King was, but he had a plan. He had memorized every detail of the King's fighting style and was confident he wouldn't lose. Hearing this, the Goblin Fairy wondered how Lime knew so much. She asked if the Goblin Goddess had given him the ability to see the future or possess clairvoyance. Realizing that wasn't possible, she approached him and asked if he was truly a goblin. Lime firmly replied that he was just an ordinary goblin. Meanwhile, in the castle's throne room, the cruel King Duel sat on his throne. He mumbled to himself about how curious it was to have a low-ranking goblin visit, especially since the goblin race was nearly extinct. Lime told Goblin Fairy to go into his pocket because he was about to use his new ability, Fast Travel. After activating it, both of them disappeared instantly and reappeared in Lime's room at the Siri dorm. Goblin Fairy was shocked by Lime's ability, but Lime remembered that it only worked in places he had already visited. He grabbed the invitation letter, adjusted his hood, and said it was time for the decisive battle. At Castle Duel, a guard flinched when he saw Lime and shouted that the castle wasn't a place for a low-rank monster like him. However, when the guard noticed Lime's invitation letter, he quickly bowed, apologized for his mistake, and allowed him to enter. Inside the castle's main hall, Lime felt uneasy about the intimidating surroundings. Goblin Fairy thought Lime didn't seem scared, but Lime admitted he was nervous because of what he was about to do. A butler politely approached them and led the way to King Duel. Just before entering, Lime told Goblin Fairy to stay hidden in his pocket no matter what happened. Meanwhile, at the front gate, a girl approached the guard. She said the student who had entered earlier had forgotten his offer for King Duel, so she was there to deliver it. After the guard let her in, she smiled in a strange way. In the throne room, Lime walked across the purple carpet, which was lined with pillars on both sides. He remembered a battle that took place here in the game and thought it was a fitting location for a boss room. The gems on the pillars glowed red as Lime got closer to the cruel king. Duel, sitting on his throne, was happy to see Lime. Meeting him in person instead of in the game made Lime feel the seriousness of the moment. He thanked the king for the invitation and introduced himself. King Duel had reviewed the records from the Magic Tournament and asked if Lime was truly from a dying, low-ranking tribe. When Lime confirmed this, the king asked how he had been improving his skills. Lime explained that he had been training every day with his darkness manipulation technique in a remote area, hidden from others. Duel paused for a moment before saying that the future of the Demon Lord's army would be secure if someone as talented as Lime existed. He encouraged Lime to keep working hard and then pointed to his promised reward. Lime saw the legendary weapons, the Sword of Damnation, Erendite, the Shield of Madness, Demon's Wall, and the Harness of Evil, Chains of Hades. He was surprised by the legendary options and began to wonder which one he should choose. After some time, he chose the Sword of Damnation, Erendite. Duel picked it up using his levitation magic and told the kid to take it. However, before the kid could grab it, Duel revealed that the pillars leading up to his throne were decorated with special jewels. If anyone with bad intentions passed by, the jewels would glow red. The kid quickly grabbed the sword handle and swung it toward him, but luckily Lime was quick and managed to dodge it, jumping back. He was still injured and blamed himself for underestimating the cruel king. Duel believed the kid had great potential, so he decided he needed to kill him before he became a bigger threat. He summoned his army. Countless monsters then started appearing from different spots of the throne room. Lime clicked his tongue, saying this would be the end. Cruel King claimed wouldn't forgive him even if he cried and begged for mercy, because rebels should be punished even worse than death. Lime explained he wasn't talking about his own end. He was there to take the king's head and claim his domain for himself. King Duel glared at Lime and asked if he was serious. Lime said yes, but added he might forgive the king if he cried and begged for mercy. Duel, angered, grinned and declared he would kill him. He commanded his army to finish the job. As the army moved in, Lime asked Goblin Fairy to heal him. She followed his orders but reminded him she couldn't fully heal him because the sword had a heal block debuff. Lime knew this because, in the game, players had to fight King Duel in a raid battle due to his overwhelming power. He was supposed to be alone in the room, but now his minions were everywhere. Lime realized that this was one difference from the game world, making things even harder for him. After dealing with some minions, he jumped to another pillar. When a flying demon tried to sneak up on him, he jumped again to another pillar. He used a level 30 dark worm that turned into threads to trap the gargoyle and swung it around before throwing it into the wall, causing a huge explosion that killed other minions. Lime then fired several attacks at a shaking Cyclops, killing it on impact, along with others nearby. The cruel king couldn't believe what he was watching. Lime teased him, telling him to summon more minions. Lime kept firing at the minions but didn't notice one of the monsters crawling behind him. The monster rushed forward and attacked, but Lime quickly reacted and slashed it. He was about to jump to the other pillar when he was surprised by another monster ready to attack him. Lime used Dark Magic Flare Bomb level 5 to defeat it. He landed safely on one of the pillars and then jumped to the other one. Watching the kid keep running, the cruel king wondered how much longer he could last. Lime kept slashing at the enemies but paused when he felt pain in his wound. The king chuckled and asked what was wrong, reminding him that he still had a long way to go. Lime agreed, saying his time might be up soon. The king laughed loudly and told him to die already. Monsters continued crawling toward Lime. Lime explained that he kept jumping from pillar to pillar because he was preparing for something. Now that he had set up his large-scale spell, he activated the magic star to summon a level 300 goblin. While casting the spell, the minions were confused when they saw a magic circle appear below their feet, and they died instantly when the General Goblin King appeared. The Goblin King smiled and said it had been a long time since he saw the world. He noticed that Lime had only summoned one goblin. The cruel king asked if Lime was mocking him and ordered his minions to crush the two weaklings. Lime told the Goblin King to show them his power. The Goblin King raised his hand and summoned an army of goblins ready for battle. When Duel saw Lime had summoned a summoner, he was shocked. Since Duel was fighting with his army, Lime decided to fight him with the same strategy, explaining that goblins were powerful because of their numbers. The battle began between the minions. While the monsters were stronger than the goblins fought back because of their large numbers. Archer goblins shot arrows to kill the flying demons, and swordsmen fought bravely against the strong monsters. In the end, the goblins managed to defeat all the monsters. Duel couldn't believe it. The Goblin King praised his comrades before they vanished. With only the two of them left, Lime said they should start the second round. Annoyed, King Duel called Lime a bastard and declared he would show no mercy. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 22. Please look at the pinned comment for more information.